Hi, okay, in this video I'm going to speak about remaking the shocks on some of the older bike models, or even if they're more modern bike models, but I think most of the modern bike models do in fact give you springs. So this Honda, which is slightly newer, I think this is number 14 versus number 20. So actually that's not entirely true. For some odd reason, this one does have springs, and these two have that. Just a one piece, and I'm going to speak about remaking that. This one, which is almost as old, or probably as old, but Aoshima did give springs. So that's quite a nice setup. Although the springs that are supplied are not often as thick as the scale equivalent of the motorbike, like that over there. They're quite acceptable. Some are better, some are not. And this one, which, as I have spoken about in previous videos, was about the worst of the lot in giving a single piece like that, which is completely not what you want to be building on a motorbike. Now, I hadn't planned to remake this shock, but that would give a very, very nice upgrade on that piece of it at least. The difference being that the top and bottom parts of the shock, which I need to sit and work with, are then stuck to the rest of the frame there, and I would have to remove that. But let's ignore that one for now. So this is a remade shock for the Suzuki, and compare that to the CB750F, which I am busy remaking. So this CB750F, step number 1, now you'll see there's a thicker part and a thinner part. The thicker part ends roughly about there. So that top one there, I've already cut it off and cleaned up the piece of spring molding which they've put onto there. The thinner part is sort of just going to waste. Now that is from the Suzuki. That's a leftover piece of the Suzuki. So I'm just snipping it off. And what we want to build into that is a piece of brass rod and that shiny silver piece inside there, which on this one so far I've kept, but you don't have to keep that. So you can either snip it off so that you're left with just that, or you can keep that and spray it, and that means that your piece of brass on the inside only needs to be a sort of a short piece, that very thin part that you can see over there, that part just in there. And then you need to do a little bit of spring practice. So there's two different types of spring. This one is obviously too thick, and it was very difficult to make. That's a stronger brass. Actually, this is copper, and that copper worked very, very nicely. I took this piece of brass and wound it around a steel rod, or around a piece of sprue, but the amount of force that you need to bend it would just snap sprue off. So this particular one was around steel. This copper is a lot more workable, and you can do that around a equivalent piece of sprue that is that thick. So when you're rebuilding this, you first cut off and clean up to the And there's the other part, by the way. It's just a little bit small to show on here. There's the little top piece, and I need to drill into there so that the brass rod can run from inside there to there. And obviously you don't have a lot of height to work with in there, so you need to really be a bit good at your drilling, and it needs to be nice and centered. So I'm about to cut that one off, cut it off there in the thin part, clean that up, or alternatively, if I now decide, although I've cleaned this one up very nicely, I can just get rid of this part. You can see the blackened lines from where it's been cleaned up from the spring marks, but it's very smooth, even though you can see the lines there. And just retain that and spray that. And the reason why you might want to do that is because inside this one, you see the shiny silver on the inside, there's actually a piece of aluminium tube. So depending what little spares you have available, and I got myself a little box of random brass and aluminium offcuts, so I could just sort of dig around and find something that fits inside there, which I have. If you don't have access to a lot of spare pieces like that, you might want to retain the plastic there. Now you will notice that the end of that is not quite perfect, not quite a perfect flat cylinder end off, so I'm not entirely happy with that. But when it's behind the spring, there, it might not be as noticeable. Okay, so I had 3 spring types: the brass, that one, and this one, which has been sprayed black. Now that was brass that I used there, thinner brass, thinner than that, and much easier to make, and that actually turned out very, very well. So what is the brass that I'm using? Now, of course, I collect all sorts of odds and ends for all the bits of model building, and transformer wire is actually very nice and soft and very easy to do a number of practices to make these springs. But the transformer wire does have that coating on it, so you do need to sort of spend a bit of time cleaning that off, but it's worth collecting for various bits of the models, whether it's aircraft or the bikes, various thicknesses. And in fact you can obtain this without it having come off a transformer with that sort of epoxy coating layer, which you can scrape off with a knife. So I can't remember exactly what my source of copper was for this one, and if I did in fact scrape it off, but the point is that this is pretty easy. I'll just do a slightly bigger one here, obviously. It's very easy to wind around, and you do have to get it sort of well straight. It is possible to wind in a bit of an oval around here. I'm just going to do a very rough test here. Now obviously that is not what you want because I've got some spacing there, but depending on the softness of the copper, you can expand it out a little bit and sort of manipulate it a little bit till it looks more spring-like, which this one doesn't, since it was just a very, very quick, and of course using much too thick a rod. On this one, what I did, and in fact on this one as well, you take 2 strands of it and you wind them around together so that they automatically force a gap, but you have to then wind them so that they're really, really touching each time, no gaps at all. And then you have 2 springs that are interwoven, and when you carefully take them off, you should be able to unwind the springs from each other very carefully. That's another way. Now I do recommend that, now of course you need to measure the thickness of that so that you find a piece of rod that will give you your spring to fit onto there perfectly like that. And of course you're measuring it against the original length. So that your you can trim off a little bit, but it is sort of important that you, when you're winding it around your rod, that you're ensuring that you've taken it as far as you need to equal that spring length, and save yourself working afterwards, because that'll inevitably damage it a little bit. When you work with thicker material, it's very difficult to get that last piece of the winding to really be correct. The way it's supposed to be is almost flat, and that might need a little bit of filing work without you damaging. So you'd have to hold it there and take a file and flatten off, and that works with copper way better than with brass. So what is the most difficult? The absolute most difficult part of this is correctly drilling for a piece of brass rod, and it is probably recommendable to use the brass rod for the drilling into there, so you get your drill and your brass rod correctly, and it doesn't specifically have to be the same thickness as that one, but that's up to you. And with this one I've obviously gone quite a bit thinner inside there, possibly too thin, to be able to drill into there and into there, and to be able to get that piece of rod so that you've got a strong joint once that's in position there, without the spring on. The spring and your other little insert, if you're going to put an insert in like that. So that means my brass rod runs right from the bottom to the top and provides all of the rigidity. The spring and that shiny insert do nothing. But it's if I put a bit of force on that, I could bend that brass rod. But I've drilled in, and on that part it's easy enough. You've got a lot of space, but on this one you've got 2 millimeters and 3 at a push, and you definitely don't want to drill out the other side. You definitely don't want to drill out the top there. So the drilling absolutely perfectly concentric down there is the most difficult, and then the second part is practicing making your springs. And when you're looking at your brass material, that your brass or copper that you're going to use, it's quite easy to imagine that it's not as thick as once you've made the spring, and then you end up with a spring that is just vastly over thickness and over size. So it is worth sort of practicing a number of different materials, different thicknesses. They do make rods of copper, but they're not. This is very, very soft. I don't think they make rods quite as soft as this. So, but I think you can buy copper wire without it coming off the transformer, possibly for bonsai trees and stuff like that, for the wrapping of the branches to shape them. I think there are other sources of that. And then super glue. Once you've really got it correct, super glue into your thick part. Make sure that you're getting it trimmed off just at the right point so that you can then insert that one, but you don't glue that on top. Fit in that shiny part, or if it's plastic, just paint it and put on your top once that's painted as well. Now, if you can do this such that your drill and your brass rod were really, really well selected. You don't even need to super glue this. It's then a nice somewhat tight fit, not tight enough that you damage things as you sort of wiggling it on, and then you end up with a very well upgraded part for your old kit. So that one has got the 2 remade shocks. This one has got the 2 remade shocks. That's got the original shocks. This one, I'm a bit hesitant to actually do too much work on this one, because it's not a very good kit at all, and I'm not keen to do that much extra work while other areas of the bike are not that great. Now you'll also notice that spring, and I'm not sure if that's so on the real bike, you can't actually tell, but its windings are closer near the ends and more spread apart in the middle, which I'm guessing is the way it is on that bike, which is not the same as on many other bikes. You wouldn't have to specifically stick to that, but that's another reason that I might not go for that. So I'll probably just leave this one. This kit, by the way, this one is somewhat well progressed. I'd say it's sort of 50% done, and these 3 are very close. They'll be coming out in the next couple of months. So if you have any questions, put them in the video and I can cover certain areas in more detail. If you were wondering, by the way, I sprayed the top and bottom parts of this shock in Alclad Chrome, so that's why that part looks so pretty shiny. The spring itself was sprayed gloss black, and as I say, the inside brass rod, I could have actually shined it up with a bit of metal polish shiner. I probably should have. I didn't think of that at the time. And the aluminium is good enough. So all in all, that's not bad at all. And I'm probably going to be working on this CB750F spring tonight, and I'll go and see if I can find more of that same aluminium tube, such that I can actually put that inside there in place of that bit of plastic, and then go and select brass rod. Now you can use steel rod as well, spring steel rod, for inserting into the middle instead of that. It's just a little bit more difficult to cut. So if you have any questions on that, add them into the comments and I can cover them if required. Hope that helped. Cheers.